I want to take a second and sort of step back from the micro of the virus and think a little bit about the macro, because this is not getting nearly the attention that it deserves. One of the things that the virus has exposed is just how fragile and precarious not just the American economy is, but how fragile and precarious the entire planet's economy and circumstances are. And this is not an attack on any particular politician. There are many critiques to make of particular politicians, including our own here in the United States. But this is actually a bigger picture issue and sort of a realization that we have to come to. Yesterday, Donald Trump announced the U.S. is invoking the Defense Production Act and that we would be dipping into our stockpile of masks and ventilators because the medical system is so quickly becoming overwhelmed. And remember, we're early in this thing. We're still very early in this thing. And it's important to know that that stockpile is really meant for a truly massive crisis that is out of control. In the models, something way more serious than this virus. Now, I want to be careful. I'm not minimizing this virus. This is a crisis. We're doing what we can to deal with it. We've been covering it as a crisis. We've got to social distance, self-isolate, all of that stuff. But I also want to make sure that we understand that this is a stockpile that needs to be there in case of something like, without being dark, a nuclear attack, a flu pandemic with a really high death rate, like think 15%, a very serious death rate flu. The fact that we're just in the first week of when Trump finally stopped saying this is no big deal and is being serious about it, and we're already dipping into the stockpile that's meant to be there for those super crises. This is a virus that, again, in the end, is likely to have a death rate under 1%. Doesn't minimize the number of people that may die. I want to be really clear, but what I'm explaining is once you account for the real number of cases here, which could be orders of magnitude greater, is likely orders of magnitude greater than the official numbers, the death rate may end up somewhere between 0.7 and 1%. And we're dipping into stockpiles that are meant to be there for something far more serious. This has triggered a likely global recession, and the stock market has fallen now below the level where it was when Trump took office. So we've seen a net stock market loss under Donald Trump. People are losing 401ks. Thousands of people are dying. We're talking about massive unemployment increases, trillions of dollars in emergency government spending. And so to be really clear, this isn't about minimizing the seriousness of this virus. And in fact, we've been from day one making sure we don't minimize it and that people know it's serious and that we have to act now. But what I want you to consider is that if things are this out of control now, where we're already dipping into these stockpiles, if it's serious enough that I'm certainly going to remember this period for the rest of my life, assuming I make it out, just imagine what would be going on if this was a more deadly flu, a nuclear attack, or some other major event. We are incredibly unprepared, and having an incompetent president doesn't help. But this is bigger than Donald Trump. Even when we think about the bailouts that are now correctly going to have to be done, a lot of it relates to the structural liabilities and the precarious nature of our economy. This whole discussion about restaurant workers who need to be bailed out, it's an accurate discussion. They need to be bailed out. But if we had a better infrastructure for paid leave for such restaurant workers, this wouldn't be such an immediate crisis. The declarations that Donald Trump and governors had to make about we've got to change how health insurance deals with the cost of testing and treatment because this is an emergency. All of that would be made irrelevant if our healthcare system was more stable and sensible from day one. I said it yesterday and I'll say it again. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And it couldn't possibly be more clear than with this current situation. And the reality that we all have to understand is this is a feature of our economic system, not a bug. It feels like a bug because now we're in crisis, but this is a feature. Redundancy and being proactive costs money. If you just react, it only costs you money when the you know what hits the fan. Warehouses, surplus staff, etc. When the market plays too big of a role, this is what happens. That stuff is just too expensive. When the private sector has too much power, this is what happens. Now, although this isn't meant to blame Trump, the entire world is to some degree underprepared. we also do need to recognize that there is blame here to assign. And in the United States, one of our two major political parties, the Republican Party, is the one that believes readiness, preparedness, that it's wasteful spending. That also has to change for good, because otherwise we're not going to learn anything from this, or at least nothing that we will actually be able to get consensus on and act on. I don't know whether this fiasco will change anything for the Republican Party. They tend not to learn from mistakes, but they should. And then lastly, the other scary reality is that the virus has exposed how unprepared the U.S. is for any kind of biological attack as well. And I know that, we don't want to add more onto what we're dealing with now. A lot of us don't want to be thinking about that, but that is the truth. And the goal would be you learn from mistakes and then you become more resilient. Nassim Nicholas Taleb writes about anti-fragility in systems and at the individual level, and he writes about black swan events, two things that are very, very relevant right now. I encourage you to check out his books, which are very good. It's not often what people want to think about, but we need to be thinking about it. And this has really exposed a lot. And lastly, later in the program, this entire crisis has significantly improved the climate change situation. And that is something I hope we will actually learn from. I'll deal with that a little bit later. Let me know your thoughts. We'll be posting about this on the David Pakman Show Instagram page at David Pakman Show. Follow that. And also follow me on Instagram at david.pakman. Later this week or over the weekend, I will be doing a tour of the home setup, because we've decentralized production of the David Pakman Show for social isolation purposes, social distancing purposes. And I will show you guys, it's quite wild what we've put together here. I'd love it if you checked out a YouTube channel we're partnering with. Their content is great, and they're good friends of the David Pakman Show. The channel is called Upflip, and you can get there at davidpakman.com/upflip. Make sure you subscribe when you're there. If you own your own business, if you're thinking of starting one, if you're interested in entrepreneurship and building companies, as many of you know I am, I think you will love this, because every week Upflip gives you sort of an inside look at a successful small business. How did the entrepreneur do it? How was it built from the ground up? The stories are inspiring. I always love learning about how business owners got to where they are. And they share a ton of wisdom about mistakes, what they learned, really great insights. And Upflip uploads new videos every Wednesday featuring a totally new business. Check it out at davidpakman.com/upflip. Link is right down below underneath this video. Subscribe to their channel and click that bell icon to get notifications.